Once upon a time, I shared a home with my pals. Our group was a cozy circle of 4. There was myself, Eddie, Lucas, and Sam. We were trotting through our final college lap, and by then, we'd been roomies for a stretch of nearly 3 years. The college I attended was huge, brimming with more than 20,000 young learners. It was a regular thing to bump into new faces, despite having roamed those grounds for ages. Our abode was a semi-detached house, a brisk 15 to 20-minute jaunt from campus. Stepping inside, you'd find yourself in a vast space that flowed into the living room, decked out with a couple of comfy sofas to crash on. Our sleeping quarters were nestled upstairs, alongside the sole washroom of the house. We also had a basement, raw and untouched. It served as the final resting place for an array of forgotten trinkets and whatnots. Out back was a modest patch of yard, encircled by a lofty wooden barrier. The lawn was a bit of a sorry sight, sparse enough to spare us the chore of mowing. It was rare for any of us to wander out there. Very rare indeed. Our next-door neighbor was an elderly chap named Mr. Thompson, sharing the other half of our dwelling. He was a gem, always cheery, plus he was hard of hearing, which worked out for us night owls. I doubt any of our ruckus ever reached his ears. With the end of our academic journey in sight, we decided to throw a massive bash, one final hurrah before donning our caps and gowns. Invites were flung far and wide to our comrades, with a "the more the merrier" tag attached. Guests began trickling in around 8 in the evening, and in no time, our humble home was teeming with life. Lucas and I opted to steer clear of the booze, taking up the mantle of watchdogs for the night. I've never been one to fancy a drink, so playing the sober sentinel suited me just fine. Come 10:30 p.m., the house was bursting at the seams, easily the grandest shindig we'd hosted in our tenure there. A good 100 souls mingled under our roof, but we were all for it. It was a peaceful revelry, no scuffles, just a collective reveling in the moment. Despite the joy around me, the heat was climbing. The warmth of 100 beings will do that. I slipped out to the backyard for a gulp of the night's coolness. Darkness blanketed the area. Our only glimmers of light were the weak glow from the house's rear window and a faint shimmer from a street lamp nearby. A handful of others had the same idea, looking for a breather. I chatted with some mates out there, but soon they all drifted back to the indoor festivities. So there I stood, alone save for one other soul, a stranger in the shadows, his face hidden by the night. Eager to make sure everyone was having a good time, I strolled over to the shadowy figure and cheerfully asked, "Hey there, how's it going? Having fun?" He gave the surroundings a slow, sweeping gaze, muttered something I couldn't catch, and as he turned his head, a slice of light from the window brushed his face. It struck me. I had absolutely no clue who this man was. What was truly odd was his age. He seemed to be pushing 40. Considering we were all in our college years, with the eldest among us barely touching 25, this was an unusual sight. The man sported a neatly trimmed brown beard. His eyes sat deep in their sockets, and his skin had the tough look of someone who's seen many a sun. He was topped off with a black knitted cap and stood quite tall, about my height, and I'm a good 6'2". Sure, we had said, "Bring friends," but it was a puzzle trying to figure out which of our acquaintances he might know. That thought buzzed in my mind, but courtesy won over. I wished him well and merged back into the sea of partygoers. The memory of the man faded fast once I rejoined the festivities, and he didn't cross my path again that night, neither inside the house nor in the yard. Around 2 in the morning, the music died down and the crowd dispersed. Sam and Greg headed straight to Dreamland while Lucas and I started the cleanup operation. We took a tour of the house, ensuring no stragglers or snoozers were tucked away anywhere. Chattering about this and that, we scoped out the main floor before descending into the chaos of the basement. The thought was it'd be quick since no partygoer had ventured there. The mess was overwhelming. It was impossible to see much of anything. We shrugged it off. No reason anyone would have gone down there, we figured. Doors secured, we called it a night. I queued up a movie on my laptop and dozed off to its rhythm. The silence of the night was shattered by a blood-curdling scream from next door, in Lucas's room. I leaped from my bed, heart pounding, and raced to his room at the sound of a heavy thud. Bursting in, I found Lucas grappling with an intruder. Lucas had the upper hand. The man was pinned, thrashing on the floor. Lucas yelled, "Get the police now!" By then, Sam had joined the fray, helping Lucas subdue the man as I dialed for help. When the police arrived, they cuffed the guy and led him away. As they lifted him up, recognition dawned. It was the same man from the backyard. He'd concealed himself somewhere before we locked down for the night, likely in the basement amidst the clutter. Lucas recounted waking to find the man looming over his bed, an unsettling vigil. Thankfully, Lucas's quick thinking meant no one was hurt, and nothing was missing. Sam's wallet was untouched in the kitchen, cash and all. If theft wasn't his aim, then what sinister plot had he concocted? I kept to myself that I had seen him earlier. The thought that they might point fingers at me for the night's terror was unbearable. But the guilt? That was mine to bear, for I could have acted but didn't, and it nearly ended in disaster. I'm a 19-year-old girl from a small place in West Midlands, England. I'm keeping the town a secret because I'm worried someone might figure out where this all happened. During the festive season of 2022, a longtime friend of mine, let's call her Lucy, sent me a message one day. She wanted me to come to a get-together at her home. Her parents were out visiting relatives, so we had the whole place to ourselves. This wasn't a holiday bash or anything special, just a casual gathering since her folks were away. The next day, as evening fell and darkness covered the town, I arrived right as the fun was kicking off at about 5 p.m. Stepping into the house, I was met with a crowd. The place was packed with young folks, mostly teens, many of whom I didn't know. Lucy later mentioned she didn't know most of them either. They were friends of friends who heard about the gathering and showed up. Despite the house being full of strangers, Lucy didn't seem to mind. Everywhere you looked, there was something happening. An hour in, and many were already stumbling around, tipsy. There was a lot of dancing, yelling, and overall, people seemed to be enjoying themselves. But not everyone was there to have a good time in a friendly manner. A few quarrels did pop up now and then. Me, Lucy, and another close friend, let's call her Emma, settled on the couch in the living room. We munched on snacks and sipped our drinks, but I was careful not to drink too much. I didn't want to lose control, especially not in a house full of people I hardly knew. Hours passed, and I stayed put, observing the chaos from our spot. That's when I noticed, through a gap in the crowd, a guy sitting across the room locking eyes with me. His smile was wide and unsettling when our eyes met. With a creepy finger wave, he then got up and left the room, still keeping his gaze fixed on me. It was odd, but I figured it might be someone I knew but just didn't recognize. The guy's look was unique. He wore a blue Cookie Monster hat, oversized pink and white pants, and a fluffy white sweater adorned with teddy bears. His nails were painted in various dark shades. His style stood out, and though it was strange, I found it kind of cool. He seemed quite young, maybe around 15 or 16. I asked Lucy and Emma if they knew who he was. I started calling him Cookie Hat Guy, but they had no idea either. They'd noticed him too, and their expressions confirmed they found his behavior odd as well. Later, I needed to use the restroom, so I headed for the stairs. That's when I saw Cookie Hat Guy peeking at me from upstairs. He ducked away when he saw me notice him, which really started to creep me out. What was he up to? I hesitated, but needed to go, so I went upstairs, away from where he had been. I rushed into the restroom and locked it. While I was in there, I noticed shadows under the door like someone's feet. They just stood there, no knocking or trying to enter, just standing. Then, a tapping sound came from the door, followed by scratching. I figured it must be Cookie Hat Guy. It was such a strange thing, and I didn't know how to react. I called out, "It's occupied," hoping they would go away. The tapping stopped, but then a larger shadow blocked the light. I heard sniffing sounds, and then fingers with dark painted nails slid under the door. It had to be him, the Cookie Hat Guy. The guy was acting so strangely, I just froze there for a moment, staring in disbelief. Then I gathered my courage and called out loudly, "What do you think you're doing?" That seemed to snap him out of whatever weird state he was in, and he slowly withdrew his hand from under the door. He then just stood there, not moving a muscle, like a statue in the doorway. Next thing I knew, the light from the hallway vanished. It looked like he turned off the light switch. Without the light, his shadow was gone too. Then, out of the darkness, came his laugh. It was eerie and sent shivers down my spine. I felt a wave of panic because I had left my phone downstairs. I couldn't text Lucy or Emma to let them know what was happening. I thought about yelling for help, but the noise from the party would drown out my voice. After taking care of business, I wanted to head back to the party, but fear gripped me. Was he still lurking out there? I waited a few minutes, then flung the door open, and what I found was deeply unsettling. Across from the bathroom, there was a bed in the corner of the room, and Cookie Hat Guy was curled up on it, rocking and humming softly to himself. Then, abruptly, he stopped humming and locked eyes with me. He snatched the blanket up to his nose, and his eyes grew huge. I dashed downstairs, shaken, to find Lucy and Emma. They could see something was up. I told them everything. They were just as freaked out and confused as I was. Lucy decided to confront him. When she returned, she told us she found him hiding in a closet, doodling weird, childish pictures. She told him to leave, and with a creepy grin, he just got up and left the room. A while later, Emma and I went to the kitchen for a snack. Inside, there he was, Cookie Hat Guy, acting completely normal, chatting and laughing with some others. He seemed intelligent and articulate. It was like he was two different people. He hadn't noticed me in the noise and crowd. I grabbed some food and returned to the living room, pondering if I should ask him about his earlier behavior. But something held me back. By 2 a.m., the party was winding down. I was tired and went upstairs to the guest room to sleep. I was abruptly woken up by a touch. It was Cookie Hat Guy, running his fingers through my hair. I screamed, he ran, and I heard the kitchen door slide open and shut. Lucy and others came running. I was so shaken I couldn't even speak. I pleaded with Lucy to call me a ride. My phone was dead, so I couldn't do it myself. Soon, my Uber arrived, and Emma decided to come with me for support. As we started driving, passing some trees, I heard a loud whisper from outside. I looked and saw him, Cookie Hat Guy, grinning at me from behind a tree as we drove away. I couldn't bring myself to look back. I just wanted to be home. Days later, strange presents started showing up at my door like flowers. I was puzzled at first, but then the fourth gift was that same Cookie Monster hat and a note saying, "Wear this when you go out and we'll be twins." I realized it was him, the creepy guy from the party. But how did he know where I lived? I called the police and gave them a detailed description, including the hat and the teddy bear sweater he wore that night. I just want this person to leave me alone once and for all. Back when I was getting my degree, I'd end up at heaps of social gatherings, especially during the early years. Seemed like there was some shindig or other every other night. One evening, my pal Betty asked if I wanted to head to a get-together at someone's place not far from where I stayed, so I figured why not. We rocked up to find a pretty snooze-worthy scene. Just a handful of folks were there, and they were all huddled around a game of some sort. I'm not against a chill game night, but they were smack in the middle of it, and there wasn't an easy way for Betty and me to jump in, so we ended up just hanging back and watching. I was itching to get out of there, but Betty was keen on sticking around because she fancied one of the guys playing. So, after enduring what felt like the longest hour ever, I finally plucked up enough nerve to bail. Cooked up some story about needing to do some schoolwork, mumbled my goodbyes and split. My place was just a short stroll away, so walking by myself didn't seem like a big deal. But I hadn't gone more than a block or two when I got the heebie-jeebies. Glancing back, I spotted some dude trailing a bit behind me. He had his hood yanked up, making it tough to see his face, but from the look of him, he was probably another college kid. Now, I'm the type who gets the willies pretty quick when I think I'm being tailed, and I'm not shy about admitting I can get a bit twitchy. To shake this potential tail, I figured I'd circle the block. If he was still on my heels after that, it'd be clear as day that he was tailing me. So, after looping around, I ended up back where I'd first clocked the guy. My heart practically stopped when I saw he was still there. In a sort of desperate bid to shake him, I zigzagged across the road, but he kept up. I started to speed walk, trying to put some distance between us, but he wasn't letting up, kept pace with me every step. I was over my shoulder every few seconds by then, and it was obvious. This guy was sticking to me like glue. One more peek back, and I caught him digging around in his hoodie pocket. He didn't pull anything out, but it got me wondering if he was packing something scary. That's when I finally snapped out of it and got my phone out to call the cops. No way was I leading this guy to my front door. Before long, a police cruiser showed up, and I spent a minute or two filling in the officer. We looked around for the creeper, but surprise, surprise, he'd done a runner. The spot was empty. The cops hung around long enough to make sure I was safe at home, then they cleared out. I never did figure out who was dogging my steps that night. My bet? It was probably one of the dudes from the bash. My pad was only a short walk away, so what are the odds some random lurker was just happening by right then?